The house only appeared at midnight. I know how ridiculous that sounds. If someone had told me a house appeared and disappeared every day on the same street, I would have laughed. But 3 years ago, I watched it happen with my own eyes. And by the time I understood what number 14 really was, people were already dying. I was 16 when I noticed something strange about Birchwood Lane. Every house had an even number: 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16, 18. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then, one afternoon, I realized something was missing. Number 14. There wasn't a number 14. There wasn't even a house, just an empty lot squeezed between number 12 and number 16. The moment I noticed it, a strange feeling settled into my stomach. Because I walked this street every day. How had I never noticed it before?
That evening, I asked my parents. The reaction I got scared me more than I expected. According to them, there was no empty lot. There never had been. They insisted number 12 and number 16 stood directly beside each other. No gap, no missing house, nothing. The problem was, I could literally see the empty lot from our front window. The next day, I took pictures. I wanted proof, something I could show everyone. I stood across the street and photographed the lot from every angle. Then I went home and nearly dropped my phone. Because the empty lot wasn't in any of the photos. Every picture showed number 12 and number 16 standing side by side, exactly like my parents described. The gap had vanished. The camera hadn't captured it. Only I could see it. And that's when I started wondering if I was losing my mind.
That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about the lot felt wrong. At 11:58 p.m., I looked out my bedroom window. The lot was empty. 11:59 p.m., still empty. Then midnight arrived. Every light in my room flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. I looked back outside and my heart nearly stopped. A house stood in the middle of the lot. A massive Victorian mansion, 3 stories tall. Its windows glowed with warm yellow light. Shadows moved behind the curtains. People walked from room to room. Children ran through hallways. It looked like a normal family home. Except for one thing. 30 seconds earlier, it hadn't existed. For 13 nights, I watched the house appear. Every night, midnight, exactly. The same lights, the same people, the same movements, like a recording trapped in a loop. Then, on the 14th night, something changed. A little girl appeared in one of the upstairs windows, and for the first time, someone looked directly at me. She couldn't have been older than 10. She stared straight through the glass, straight at my bedroom, straight at me. Then, she smiled. Not a happy smile, a desperate one. The kind of smile people give when they're trying not to cry. Slowly, she pressed her hand against the window.
Then, she mouthed 3 words. Help us leave. The next night, I crossed the street. I told myself I was only getting a closer look. Nothing more. I wasn't planning to go inside. At least that's what I kept telling myself. But the moment I stepped onto the property, the front gate swung open by itself. I froze. The gate hadn't just opened. It had invited me in. Every instinct told me to run. Instead, I walked toward the front door. And before I could touch it, it slowly opened, waiting, as if the house had been expecting me. The inside was impossible. The hallway stretched much farther than the house should have allowed. Doors lined both sides, hundreds of them. Voices echoed from every direction. People filled every room. Children, teenagers, adults, elderly men and women. At first, they seemed normal. Then I started noticing their clothes. One woman wore clothing from the 1950s. Another looked like she had stepped out of the 1970s. One man still wore an old military uniform. And none of them looked older than the day they disappeared. Then, they all stopped what they were doing
And stared at me. Every single one. The hallway fell silent. A woman near the stairs began crying. A teenager covered his mouth. An old man simply whispered, "Another one." That's when I realized something horrifying. These weren't residents. These weren't ghosts. These were missing people. And somehow, they were all still alive. The creature landed on all fours, and the impact shook the floor beneath us. For a split second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The thing looked almost human, but only almost. Its arms were far too long, and its fingers dragged across the floor like spider legs. Dozens of eyes blinked across its face, neck, and forehead. Then every eye locked onto me at once. The creature smiled and lunged. "Run!" Emily grabbed my wrist, and we bolted down the hallway. The owner crashed after us, splintering wood beneath its hands as people screamed and doors slammed shut around us. The entire house erupted into chaos. We raced around one corner and then another, but something felt wrong. The owner wasn't trying to catch us. It was steering us. A staircase suddenly appeared where a wall had been moments earlier, and Emily dragged me toward it. Behind us, the owner crawled across the ceiling, not following us, hurting us, forcing us somewhere. Finally, an old man pulled us through a doorway and slammed it shut behind us. The room fell silent. The owner didn't follow. I looked around and saw thousands of books covering every wall. The old man adjusted his glasses and introduced himself as Arthur. Emily immediately relaxed, which told me she trusted him. I didn't. When I asked what the creature was, Arthur simply called it the owner. Then he revealed something that made my blood run cold. The owner had once been a prisoner here, just like everyone else. The house had changed him. According to Arthur, if someone stayed long enough, the house could turn them into something far worse than human. I asked about the books, and Arthur showed me shelf after shelf of notebooks filled with names, dates, sketches, and observations. He explained that the house steals memories, so he writes everything down before it can be forgotten. He told me he had forgotten his birthday countless times, forgotten his parents, and even forgotten his wife. The notebooks remembered what he no longer could. Suddenly, the library made sense. It wasn't a collection of books. It was Arthur's entire life preserved on paper. As he spoke, I noticed Emily sitting quietly in a corner drawing. When I asked what she was drawing, she showed me a page filled with hundreds of suns. At first, I thought she simply liked drawing them, but she shook her head. She told me she was trying not to forget what daylight looked like. Then she quietly admitted she hadn't seen the sun since 1989. The sadness in her voice hit harder than anything Arthur had told me. Before I could respond, a bell echoed through the house. Every resident froze instantly. A woman dropped her cup. An old man started praying. Emily's face turned completely pale. When I asked Arthur what the bell meant, he whispered a single word: choosing. The bell rang again, then again. The lights flickered violently before every light in the room suddenly went out.
Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. For several seconds, all I could hear was breathing. Then the lights returned, and Emily was gone. The room erupted into panic. I searched everywhere, shouting her name, but she had vanished. Arthur closed his eyes as though he already knew what had happened. He told me the house had made its choice. Before I could demand an explanation, a scream echoed from somewhere deep beneath the floorboards. It was Emily. The sound traveled through the walls and seemed to come from miles underground. Then it stopped abruptly, as though someone had silenced her mid-scream. Several residents lowered their heads while one woman began crying.
I told Arthur I was going after her. For the first time since meeting him, I saw genuine fear on his face. After a long silence, he finally agreed to show me something. He pulled aside a bookshelf, revealing a hidden staircase descending into darkness. Cold air drifted upward, carrying the smell of wet earth and decay. Arthur called it the basement. I shined my flashlight into the darkness and thought I saw something moving far below. Something large. Something breathing. Then, while preparing to leave, something else caught my attention.
A thick black binder sat on a nearby table. Inside were thousands of photographs of missing people. Page after page, face after face. Victims from every decade. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. Then, I reached the final page, and my heart nearly stopped. The photograph staring back at me was mine. It had been taken yesterday. The same clothes, the same expression, even the same scratch on my chin. Beneath the photo was a handwritten message. 3 words written in my own handwriting. Don't trust Arthur. I slowly looked up. Arthur was already staring at me. Instead of explaining, Arthur asked me a question. What was the last thing I remembered before entering number 14? I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't. My bedroom, my family, school, everything felt distant and blurry, like a dream fading after waking up. Arthur lowered his head and quietly told me I hadn't entered number 14 tonight. According to him, I had entered 3 years ago. The house had been feeding on my memories ever since. Then he said something even worse. He told me I wasn't here to rescue Emily. I was here because I had already tried once before. Somewhere deep beneath the house, something laughed, and for the first time, I realized the voice sounded familiar. No! The word escaped my mouth before I could stop it. Arthur had to be wrong. I wasn't trapped here. I had a family. I had a life. I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to picture my mother. Just her face, nothing else. But the harder I tried, the less I could remember. The details slipped away like smoke. And suddenly I realized something horrifying. I couldn't remember what my own mother looked like. The room felt colder. Much colder. Arthur watched silently. The house takes memories first, he said. Eventually, it takes enough that people stop trying to leave. I looked around. A woman sat in the corner staring into space. After several seconds, she quietly spoke. What year is it? Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. A distant scream echoed through the house. Emily! Still alive. The realization hit me immediately. If Emily was screaming, she hadn't reached the end yet. I grabbed the flashlight. I'm going after her. Arthur stared at me for several seconds. Then he reached into his pocket and handed me a small brass key. The metal felt strangely warm. "You'll need this." "What is it open?" Arthur looked away. "The last door." Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. Before I could ask another question, every light in the house suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Several people screamed. Then, the owner's voice echoed through the walls. "I know what you found." The floor trembled beneath us. "I know what he told you." The hidden staircase slammed shut. The bookshelf slid back into place, sealing the entrance. "And I know where you're going." The room erupted into panic. Residents scattered in every direction. Furniture overturned, glass shattered. The copies began moving toward me. Not running, walking. Calmly. Like they knew there was nowhere I could go. The oldest version raised a trembling hand and pointed toward the floor. Toward the basement. Everything suddenly became silent. Then I heard it. A sound beneath the house. Not movement, not destruction. Breathing. Slow, deep, ancient. The floorboards rose slightly with every breath. The walls groaned around us. Not because they were collapsing, because they were straining. As if the entire house had been built around something. Built to contain something. And whatever was beneath us was waking up. The breathing grew louder. The house shuddered. The copies stopped moving. For the first time, they looked afraid. Then Emily's voice echoed through the house. Everyone froze. I froze. At first, I thought she was crying. Then I realized she was laughing. The laugh belonged to Emily. That's what terrified me. Not because it sounded different, because it sounded happy, genuinely happy, as though she had finally found something she had been searching for. The laughter spread through every hallway, every room, every dark corner of number 14. The breathing beneath the floor continued. Slow, massive, patient. Then the oldest version of me spoke one final time. She opened the door. My heart nearly stopped. "What door?" The old man smiled, but before he could answer, the entire house shook violently. A crack split the floor from wall to wall. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere deep below, Emily continued laughing. And for the first time since entering number 14, I was no longer afraid of the owner. I was afraid of whatever Emily had found in the basement. The key slid into the lock. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire house screamed. Not the people inside, the house itself. The walls shook, the ceiling cracked, the floor split beneath my feet. Somewhere deep below, Emily's laughter echoed through the darkness. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Blinding sunlight poured through. I didn't hesitate. I ran. Behind me, the house groaned like a wounded animal. The hallway twisted. The walls folded inward. The owner screamed. Hundreds of trapped voices cried out at once. Then I crossed the doorway, and everything vanished.
I woke up, lying in the middle of Birchwood Lane. The morning sun hung overhead. The empty lot stood before me. No mansion, no gate, no number 14. Just dead grass moving in the wind. For several seconds, I simply stared.
Then a car screeched to a halt beside me. The driver climbed out and looked at me as though he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. Within an hour, police officers surrounded the area. I barely listened to their questions. My eyes remained fixed on the empty lot. Then one detective asked for my name. I gave it. The expression on his face changed immediately. He opened a folder and slid a photograph toward me. My photograph. The same one hanging inside number 14. My missing person report. I looked at the date and my blood turned to ice. I hadn't disappeared 3 years ago. I had disappeared 43 years ago.
The next day, they brought me to a nursing home. The entire drive felt unreal. 43 years. 43 years had passed while I remained 16. When we arrived, a nurse led me into a small room overlooking a garden. An old man sat beside the window. His hair was completely white. His hands trembled slightly. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then, his eyes widened. Tears instantly filled them, and I recognized him. My brother. The same brother who had been 22 when I vanished. Now he looked older than our father ever had. "It's really you," he whispered. I couldn't answer. My throat had closed. To him, I had been gone for almost half a century. To me, it felt like days. He began crying, and so did I.
We spent hours talking, or at least trying to. There were entire decades of life I had missed. Marriages, children, funerals, birthdays, all gone, all beyond reach. Before I left, my brother opened a drawer beside his bed and handed me an old photograph. "I kept this all these years," he said. I looked down. At first it seemed ordinary, just a picture of Birchwood Lane. Then I noticed the date. The photograph had been taken 15 years after my disappearance. I frowned. Then I noticed something else. Standing in the empty lot was a teenage boy, 16 years old, wearing the exact clothes I had disappeared in. My clothes, my face, my expression. Watching the camera, my hands began shaking. "That's impossible." My brother nodded slowly. "I know." 3 months later, he passed away. The photograph became the only thing I couldn't explain. Not the police, not the reporters, not the investigators. Nobody had an answer. Because according to every record, I was trapped inside number 14 when that photograph was taken. I shouldn't have been standing in that lot, but I was. Most people don't believe my story. That's fine. I don't expect them to. Some things aren't meant to be believed. They're only meant to be survived. But sometimes, just after midnight, I wake to the sound of children laughing outside my window. And every time I hear it, I look outside. There's never a house, never a gate, never a mansion. Only an empty lot, waiting. And once, just once, I thought I saw a little girl standing in the darkness, smiling, holding a drawing covered in suns. Then she was gone. But the empty lot remained, waiting for someone else to notice that number 14 is missing.